sponsored by the Central Valley Regional HR Hotline. My name is Anna Manzano. I'm the Digital Media and Event Strategist here at the California Employers Association. Before we officially get into today's content, just a couple details to cover with you. So as you see, your audio is muted for today's presentation, but there is going to be lots of opportunities and invitations to engage during today's session. If one of those ways to engage means having a question, you can just type that into the chat box at any time, and we'll do our best to address them as we go. As Jessica is delivering the content, I will be making sure I am paying attention to the chat box and that you get all the information that you need today. Handouts for this training, those were sent out in yesterday's reminder email. If I will, though, drop the PDF into the chat in just a couple minutes just to make sure you received it one way or another. So once you see that file pop up, you just click it and it'll download locally to your drive so that you can follow along or reference it later. And then last but not least, we do have a survey. Excuse me. So because your feedback is so important to us, we have a 5-question survey. It takes about 60 to 90 seconds, super quick. But the feedback that you share with us, we then share with our partners over at Central Valley. And we just collectively make sure that we are meeting and hopefully exceeding your expectations with these trainings, as well as our entire suite of employer resources. So if you could take that minute at the end, we would really greatly appreciate that. Okay, all the housekeeping is done. So now I have the great privilege of introducing our amazing trainer today. We have Jessica Rivera, who is our training and coaching director. And I know we have so much to cover, so it is all yours.
Thank you, Anna. Pleasure to be here with everyone. Hopefully, Anna, we can see the screen pretty well. No problem there.
Good to go.
All right, good. All right. Just a couple of things before we get started, folks. We're together for 1 hour. One of the things that we always let folks know when we are doing training is that we aren't attorneys. Our attorneys make us say we're not attorneys. We don't provide legal advice. We do provide guidance and support when it comes to human resources training and compliance. And so we always encourage folks, if you ever find yourself in need of legal advice, you always want to seek an attorney. With that in mind, who we are at California Employers Association, we are an organization who delivers peace of mind for employers throughout the state of California. We get 2,000 calls a month from employers about things related to human resources. We touch many employers every month for other services that we provide. So we provide human resources services and solutions. And again, we're excited to have our partnership with Central Valley Hotline to support you in your HR needs. What we'll be talking about as we talk about managing wellness in the workplace is talking about the difference between stress and burnout, and there are some differences. Additionally, we're going to talk about some of the causes. What are those things that happen in the workplace that cause us problems and create that stress for us? And then if we don't address it or don't take care of it, it's going to cause burnout for us, which we don't want to get to. Also, we'll talk a little bit about some of the current trends that we see in the workplace today. As I mentioned, we work with lots of employers, and we have a lot of just real-time information that what employers are doing to maintain and establish that wellness in the workplace for their employees. And then also some strategies for you, as well as for your folks, to manage stress and how to get through some of those trying times that we find ourselves in a workplace and an environment of uncertainty. With that in mind, one of the things I want to ask you is a question for you, and feel free to put it in the chat. How are you today? And when I ask that question, how are you really? How are you feeling today? I'm going to put up here a few of the emotions of all of the 87 that we have. But if you were to pick one, what would that be for you today? And please feel free to put that in the chat. It's interesting because many times people will ask us about how we're doing, and we'll just say, fine. We don't necessarily identify our feelings or how we're doing. And what's important about being able to identify and acknowledge how we happen to be feeling at any given point in time, that can make a true difference for us in how we move forward and how we act upon how we happen to be feeling at that time. So with that in mind, just know there's 87 emotions and experiences that define what it means for us to be human. And I always joke that we're not robots yet. We go through a myriad of emotions every single day. And we have up to, I believe the last number I saw was up to 80,000 thoughts that go through our head every single day. And the scary part of that is that up to 80% of those thoughts are repetitive thoughts or they're negative thoughts. So important for us to be aware of how we're doing, how we're feeling, and act positively towards that to be able to respond in situations versus react. So let's talk for just a moment about the definition of stress and what that is. When we think about when we're undergoing stress, many times we're overwhelmed. We just feel, I can't cope with this. The pressure is too much. And stress really is our body's response to pressure. And situations in our work life and our personal life can cause that stress. It's triggered mainly when we experience something new, unexpected, or something that threatens our sense of self. And also, one of the biggest ones too is when we feel we have no control over a situation. And so when we are going through stress and we're feeling that, our mind and body both react to that being overstimulated or that feeling that we have. And our actual brain chemistry does change. In addition to that, stress hormones increase. We've all heard of cortisol. We don't like that going up. That's a stress hormone. And then also that fight or flight response. And really interesting when we think about that fight or flight response, because sometimes when we're under stress and when someone challenges us or says something that makes us feel defensive, it can actually drop our IQ temporarily. Believe it or not, it can make a difference in our IQ. And if we're not operating with our full IQ, some of the things that we're saying or things that we have access to mentally, we can't get them because we're in that emotional state. So some typical stressors that we see currently are things like time management. That's a big one for many of us. Not having enough time. I have yet to have anyone say I have too much time on our hands, but yes, sometimes if we find ourselves in a role and people aren't keeping us busy enough, that can be a stressor too. So it can work both ways, lack of time, but also too much time, and I don't feel like I'm making a difference. Unclear goals can also be a typical stressor that we see. And we encourage employers, we encourage leaders, be sure to be clear when you're interviewing people to come into your company that they know what their goals are going to be, that they know what's expected of them, in addition to your own role and that of your team. That goals are fairly clear and they're realistic. Tight deadlines. Those can really create stress for a team, for leaders, for a company. Change. We have seen so much change in the past several years, both dictated by our external environment, as well as things that just happen in our workplace that cause us to have to make change, whether it's, within the employee base or procedures or processes, whatever it is, products. And very few people like change, and we're getting better at it, but adaptability is so important in today's world. And then, of course, mental and physical health issues. We find sometimes we don't take care of ourselves enough. We don't get enough rest. And we find that will come out in behaviors or how we feel in terms of stress. Relationships. And relationships at work are really important because we work with people so much and for many times for so long in our work career. And when relationships are great, we know it. And when they're not, it does create those feelings for us. Miscommunication is a big one. Up to 73% of issues that arise in the workplace are as a result of miscommunication. And of course, trust, a foundation of any relationship, foundation of any team is trust. And when you don't have that, that can cause stress both for the leader and also for your team and for people in the company. They know it, they see it, they sense it. And then one of my favorites, which causes me stress, is when I'm personally micromanaged. If I know what I'm doing and I'm able to get my work done, I don't want to be micromanaged. And that will create stress for me too. And as we think about stress and we think about some of the surveys that we see, the rate of burnout, it has continued to grow. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because we want to make sure that if we're finding these typical stressors, we want to manage them so it does not lead to burnout. So what's the difference between stress and burnout? As I mentioned before, when we think about stress, We talked about some of the things that can cause it. And also, here's what happens when we're under stress. We have, it's over engagement. We're like too far in it. And think about when you're trying to meet a deadline and you are just not resting, you're not eating, you're rushing, rushing, rushing. It's over engagement where you're not taking time to care for yourself. Our emotions are high, they're in overdrive. And so little things can trigger us. Also, stress does produce urgency and can produce hyperactivity. It can also create a sense of no energy. I just don't have any gas in the tank. Also, it can lead, if not managed, to anxiety disorders. And unfortunately, the primary damage is physical, and you don't want that. We've all worked with people over the years that haven't managed their stress or have been under a tremendous amount of stress, and it shows up in illnesses, it shows up in injuries, it shows up in ways that it's physical, and that's not good either. So, as we think about those differences, because people use those interchangeably, but they are really very different. And as I talked about stress, let's move over to burnout because that is even more serious. And that's why we encourage people. You don't want to get to that place. And you may have been there before in a role or another time in your career. I've spent a lot of time with people over the years, and some have been there. But what happens is you check out. You literally just check out. I'm not engaged anymore. I'm not committed. I'm not loyal. I'm not productive. I'm just checking out. My emotions, they're not overactive. They're kind of blunted. There's just no care there anymore. I'm not feeling anything anymore. I'm ambivalent. It creates that sense of helplessness. Nothing I do matters. I'm not motivated to do anything because it doesn't matter. It can lead to depression, which we don't want. And then it moves over to the emotional side. And that's where it can get very, very difficult because it can lead to severe mental stress for us. We don't want that. That's why if we can identify, address things when we're in that stress mode or even preventing stress as much as we can in the workplace, that's what we want to do. And don't get me wrong, some stress is good. Some stress is healthy. It gets us to produce, it gets us to move and take action. Yet there's that point where it's no longer healthy for us. So as we think about burnout, it's really important to know that we're seeing an increase in it. We're seeing currently right now, according to the World Health Organization, that it's becoming an occupational phenomenon. And they call it, we're in the age of burnout. And it is that syndrome where, chronic stress hasn't been managed. And because of that, it turns to burnout characterized by these three dimensions here. I mentioned energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance, and that shows up in how I'm not really engaging with people. I may be isolating myself both from my work, from my commitments, from my responsibility, and it also reduces our professionalism, our efficacy, our ability to represent our company, to do our job, to be professional in the workplace. And in some cases, it can impair our brain function, and it can change our actual structure, which can lead to impaired decision making. So that's why we don't want to get into that stage of burnout, because there are so many things that can happen as a result of it. And as you think about this, there's questions you can ask of your team or observe of your team. Are they working more but enjoying it less? Does the job that used to get you excited, does it now turn you off, or you don't look forward to going to do that job anymore? Or does life seem to be leading you versus you leading your life? And then of course, are you so exhausted but you can't sleep? So that's not good either. And have you lost your sense of humor? So those are some things to ask yourself if you're finding yourself in that place, both with stress and possibly moving towards burnout. And feel free, if you have any questions as I go through this, please feel free to ask them in the chat, or we'll allow time at the end also to answer any questions. So measuring burnout, what's interesting about this is that as we measure it, you'll see that since 2020 up through 2022, you'll see the numbers continue to increase on the dimensions that they measure. And a new dimension has been brought in, which is cynicism. And cynicism, of course, is people not really believing what they're hearing, what they're seeing. So what that means in many cases is that we as leaders, we as colleagues have to make that extra effort, not only to walk our talk, but to be credible, to show, to make sure our actions reflect our values, what we say the values are at the company. That's really important. And just understanding that it does make a difference to folks how we conduct ourselves, especially as leaders. We're teaching folks how to conduct themselves too, that we're privileged to lead. If I'm a leader and I'm burning the candle at both ends and I'm stressed and continue to be stressed, that's how I operate, people are going to think that's what it's going to be at the company. When in reality, if I'm a leader who's balanced, who still works hard, still gets the work done, but yet I'm balanced both with life work balance, I'm also showing them that there is a way to do it. So it's finding that way to do it for ourselves so our people can do it for themselves. Also, what's interesting as we think about burnout is we're seeing some trends in burnout demographically. And what we're finding, especially, is that in our younger generations, we're finding that they are experiencing burnout more so than our more mature generations. We have 5 generations in the workplace right now. And our youngest generation is, of course, Gen Z, which is 18 to 24. And then we have the millennials, which includes Gen X at the 25 to 34. What's interesting about this, though, is that people have asked, why are our youngest generations, feeling that way? And part of that applies to the fact that some of the top stressors when you're early in your career, and we've all been there, many of us, we may be there right now, is we have those financial insecurities. We're in an entry level job, we may not be making a lot of money, and we're trying to make ends meet. We're in junior roles, so it's going to take some time for us to create a compensation, a salary that allows me some more discretionary income. So those things tied into high inflation, and in some cases stagnant wages, we're finding that's causing some real stress and burnout for our youngest generations. The other piece to think about with our youngest generations, and they tell us this time and time again, is that they want to grow, they want to be challenged in their company, they want to know that they have a career ahead of them, that there's an opportunity to make more money, to grow in their experiences, knowledge, titles, all of those things. So making sure that with especially our younger generations, that we're having those conversations, that they see that future with the company that they're with. And the other thing to think about too is if we're hiring a lot of folks, sometimes we do onboarding, right? We onboard new employees when they come in, we have their desk ready, we meet them, we cover all of the things that they've signed up for with the company, benefits, all of those things. And in some cases, we don't extend that onboarding a whole lot further. Onboarding should take at least 6 months with younger employees because they're just getting to learn about the company, the people they work with, what's expected of them, and it can be quite overwhelming. So that first 6 months to a year with new employees is extremely important, that they have a mentor, that their supervisor checks in with them on a regular basis, that they have clarity in their role, their responsibilities, they know what success looks like. Because at their level, they have a lot of opportunities to go to another company if they're not getting it with the company they're in. So important to think about that, and how's our onboarding process. It can make a difference in keeping your employees. So some warning signs of burnout. These are things that we want to be cognizant of, both for ourselves, but also for the people that we work with and those that work for us. It can be physical. It can be things like headaches that just won't go away, that are consistently there. It can be just, I never feel rested. Remember earlier I said, very tired, but I'm not getting sleep at night. So I could just have that fatigue that's just building upon each day, each day, each day. And many of us know what it's like when you can't sleep. We can't function for too long without sleep, not too many days. If we don't get that sleep, a lot of things are impacted. And then, of course, the physical issues with stomach and digestive issues, the psychological side of it. If any of you have ever had panic attacks, we know what those feel like. They are scary and we just aren't ourselves. Or I'm just ambivalent. It's like, huh, I may do it, I may not. I don't really care anymore. Doesn't make a difference if I do anything. I don't have that commitment, that drive that I normally have. And the big one is increasing feelings of anger, frustration, and irritability. If we are, moving towards burnout, you may see that in your folks that, gosh, you know, Anna used to be so easygoing and feeling really good about work, but now when I approach her, she's really irritable. She doesn't want to talk. She's snapping at people. She's just not herself. Or I see her getting very emotional about things now that and never used to bother her before. Then you go to the behavioral side of it, the observable things, the things that you can actually see and track. They're not producing their results. They're not making things happen. Maybe you're hearing from customers that they are just not happy with the service that your employees are giving. They miss a lot of work. They don't think twice. They're not sleeping, so they're taking more sick days. And then I mentioned this before, the isolation and just separating themselves mentally, emotionally, and sometimes physically from the team. They may not be having lunch with anyone if you're on site, or they may not be joining meetings for whatever reason, always excuses. But paying attention to those can be extremely helpful to avoid someone getting to that point. And the things that cause burnout, and these are some of them, and you may have some too, if you've ever been at that place or been close to burnout in a role that you've been in before, hopefully not the role you're in now. But if you've ever been there, these are some of the common things that we hear. And this is what is so important when it comes to this, because understanding, what these can mean both for employees and for yourself. We know that we're always busy. I mean, it's work. That's why it's called work. It takes time. But chronic overload work, where I'm burning that candle at both ends, is not good. The lack of organizational support. I can work really hard if I know I have the support of my team, my boss, senior leadership. Um, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity or the experience of working with toxic leadership. I have. I've worked with different companies over the years, and I've seen the difference that that can make, the damage that it can do, where you don't have that support. It's a cutthroat competition type of environment. People don't support each other, and that's condoned by leadership. That's not a healthy place to work. Unfair treatment. Are people being treated equitably? Are they being given those tools and resources to succeed? And are they receiving the same kind of professional development and the training, the understanding, the support from their leader? Are they being treated, unfairly? They're not getting that. Also, values mismatched, and this is a big one when it comes to bringing people on board, but also your company culture. If we talk about our company culture, that it's a culture of integrity, transparency, honesty, creativity, innovation. We can name a lot of different things. If we talk about it that way, and our values are respect, integrity, all of those things, but we don't act on them, or if an employee comes to us and they don't see leaders behaving in that way, it's a values mismatch, both for existing employees. And if you're interviewing a new employee and they share their values with you, and you talk about the company's values, you want to make sure that they're not at cross purposes. You want to make sure that there is a match there too, because that can cause burnout if you work for a company and you're not aligned behind what the company's doing or how you're being treated. So I want to do a quick poll, and I'd like to ask you all to join me for this, and just ask you, have you take just do a poll, and it's anonymous, but if you would, and this can be in your current company or a company you've been in before, but if you would, please go ahead and select one. If any of these cause you, actually you can do multiple choice, if any of these causes of burnout exist in your company currently. I'll give everybody a minute or so to do the poll, if they could, please. Good. Okay. Good. All right. So we've had just about everyone answer. Thank you. Let's go ahead and share the results and see what they look like. Okay, so as you take a look, you'll see that the first three really stood out for this group, both on work overload and we understand and acknowledge that organizations have flattened. So leaders are not only leading, inspiring, motivating, getting results, doing all the things that leaders do, but they're also doing a lot of the work too. And we're also asking our employees to do a lot of work also. So I'm not surprised to see that. The lack of organizational support, that is something that we do hear and we do see. And hopefully it's something that you talk about in your company or organization, and have that as something that you can discuss. Asking employees, doing a climate study, is just understanding what support do we need? Are we asking for the support that we need? And then values mismatch. I talked about that a few moments ago. And, the values of my company and my values, they're not in sync. And my company says they have these values, or they match my values, but I'm not seeing it in action. At my company, I'm not seeing all of those things that our company says these are our values. And then, of course, we did have a few folks talking about unfair treatment, not being treated equitably with support, resources, tools to do my job. And one person's not so sure. So I encourage you, as we continue on talking about this today, if you're finding that now, we want to make sure that you take those actions to support you and to take care of you and of your team. Thank you for sharing and taking the poll. Okay. So let's talk about those areas. Let's talk about addressing the work overload. One of the things that we hear a lot about, especially today, is we have to, in our companies, have a people first approach. New people coming in, people you're interviewing with, that's something you want to talk about with your new hires, especially if there's a lot of competition to get people that you're hiring for, and you want to talk about it with passion. You want to talk about it with conviction, credibility, because have told us, and we see this in survey after survey, I want to work for a culture that is people focused, that cares about me as an employee, not just about what I can do at work. Focus on the productivity, not necessarily the hours worked. If I'm getting the job done in 6 hours versus 7 hours or 8 hours on a given day, I'm good. And people don't have to be there or do that work if they are just for the hours, if they've already got their work done. Remember, I talked about two things: either I have too much time on my hands, or I'm working too many hours. Offer flexible and remote options when you can. We fully understand in some cases we can't. We're not able to. If we're customer facing and we have to be there, manufacturing, whatever it might be, physically there, we understand that. If you do have those options, those can make a difference. People coming into the workforce now, candidates, job seekers, they're not just requesting, they're demanding that part of their schedule has some flexibility to it. So something that we all as companies and leaders need to think about. Delegate effectively, making sure, especially if you have that opportunity to delegate. And some people don't want to delegate because they think, oh my gosh, it's going to look like I'm not doing my job, or I'm weak, or we're all comparing ourselves to each other. And if I delegate, I'm going to look like I'm not as productive as someone else. But when you think about delegate, I want you to think about it as delegate to elevate. Because when we delegate to the people we're privileged to lead, hopefully we're delegating to give them new experiences, exposure, learnings, to grow them too. And when we're able to do that, as long as we delegate effectively and with structure, it can make a real difference for your team too, because it not only gives them an opportunity to learn something and do something new, it also gives them exposure at your company to other people to see what they can do. I have found over the years, and I've led lots and lots of teams over the years, is that when I've delegated, people have usually handled a situation better than I would have. So for those of us who are, on this call today who may have control issues, like I don't want to let it go, no one can do it as well as me, trust me, sometimes they can do it better than we can. So how do we build trust and provide support? That was one of the other questions we asked in the poll. Recognize people, recognize their hard work, acknowledge what they do, let them know that you are paying attention. Gallup says, and they do surveys on so many things, one of them is employee engagement. They say that in order for employees to feel engaged, which means they're dedicated, loyal, productive, committed to the company, they need to be recognized every 7 days. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give them something tangible. Uh, it can be something as simple as a thank you, or you handled that situation beautifully, Anna. Thank you so much. You saved that customer. But paying attention and recognizing and putting that in your schedule too to make it just as important as some of the other things that we do. People have also told us that when they're in a culture where colleagues can recognize each other, that's even more powerful than sometimes getting recognized by my leader. Taking that time to say thank you for what people do for us and creating that culture within our team to thank people when they fill in for us, they do things really well, whatever it might be, but acknowledging and being specific with that gratitude. When we recognize somebody, acknowledge someone, we don't want to be a drive-by person who recognizes and say, "Oh, great job, Anna." No, we want to be specific. We want to say, "Anna, you handled that customer so calmly and you took care of that customer so beautifully, and they've told us they're going to come back and continue to do business with us." That's specific. Anna's going to remember that versus "Great job, Anna," and nothing else. She's going to wonder, what did I recognize her for? She's going to want to know what I'm saying great job for. Ask questions. When we're building trust and providing support to our team, ask questions how we can support them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments, but be open. If your employees are coming to you and they're really frustrated or for whatever reason they're having a bad day, we don't want to get defensive. We want to just pause for a moment, be empathetic, which means let me put myself in your shoes. Let me try to see this from your point of view and say, how can I help? What can we do? And asking questions to give you some time to reflect on what an employee is sharing with you. And then sometimes offer to do their work. You know, we're a small company at California Employers Association. We have about 25 employees. But one of the things that's great is that if we have an opportunity to support a team member, do some of their work for them, if they want to leave early, or maybe they've got a lot of work going on, at any level, we're open to doing that for each other. That goes such a long way for people. Appreciate your folks in public. Again, understanding how your people want to be recognized. But when you, appreciate them, acknowledge them in public, everyone gets to hear that and feel good about that. Of course, we also want to do performance management in private if we have to counsel an employee, but appreciation in public goes such a long way. And then again, like I said before, offer to help. What can I do to support you? How can I help you? This is interesting because recognition programs make a significant difference. So if you take a look, employees who are part and able to be part of recognition programs, they're 1.5 times more likely to feel that connection to their organization. And what I mean by that is they see their success as their company's success and vice versa. We're in it together. We win together. We succeed together. And when it comes to feeling connected to the people they work with, 1.3 times more likely to feel that connection. And when you have that connection, you have that trust, you have that mutual respect, you have that level of interactions that really grows a relationship. And then 1.2 times more likely to feel like their workload is manageable. We've all probably experienced this before where, gosh, we're just feeling like, oh, there's so much I have to do. And a leader will come up to us, our boss will come up to us and just say something that makes such a difference. Like, gosh, Melody, I know you're working really hard this week. I really appreciate it. Next week's going to be better. We're going to get this big order out. We'll be good. That helps people feel better too, because we're acknowledging that the workload is there. And then, of course, it creates 1.4 times more likely to recommend their company to a friend. Folks, this is so important when you think about not just recommending my company to someone who may want to work for my company, but being able to do it with that passion, with that acknowledgement, and also with that seriousness that I'm not going to just recommend anyone to my company. They've got to work like we do and they've got to be part of our team. But it creates that pride that you want your employees to have in your company. So when they talk about their company, they don't talk about it in a derogatory way. They talk about it with pride. They're actually an ambassador for your company. So when we recognize, acknowledge our employees, that helps us in all of these areas. And here's some questions to ask to establish trust, to get to know people, and to just show that interest that we have in the folks we get to work with. And they're simple questions, they're not really hard. And I understand that some people are open books, they're going to tell you far more than you probably need to know. And on the other side of that spectrum, you're going to have people who are closed books. They're very private, and we get that. So we want people to feel comfortable to share what they want to share. But just by asking the questions, sometimes for those more introverted folks, it gives them that opportunity to think, wow, yeah, I'm going to do this weekend, and here's why. And you get so many insights into the folks you work with when you're able to ask these questions. The very last one can be extremely powerful. How can I be a better leader for you? The beauty of asking for feedback from your folks is that when you've opened that door, you've given them permission to give you that feedback, whether it's, something that's really great, which is awesome, or maybe they say, well, gosh, could you do this a little bit more or more frequently, or we haven't done this in a long time. We're not going to get defensive because we've opened that door. We've asked them, how can I better support you? What can I do to be that best leader for you? And it says a lot about a leader when they're able to do that. This is a big one. Everyone deserves respect. And we hear a lot about this, especially when people are feeling pressure. And again, a lot of things externally affect us, and it may not have anything to do with work, yet, I'm still carrying it with me when I come to work. And if I come to work and I've been disrespected in my personal life, and then I come to work and I don't feel respected, I'm probably going to be triggered, even though maybe that level of disrespect at work wasn't as severe as what happened at home. So it's understanding that, how do we create that environment of respect where people feel good? We as leaders, we set that tone. How we treat people, how we speak to people, how we follow up with people, talks respect all of the time, how we behave, how we conduct ourselves in the workplace. And you may never know the impact you have on your employees, but we do set that tone. We set that energy level for our folks. And you want your workplace to reflect that culture of respect. And in order to do that, we have to have respect for ourselves in order to be able to respect others. And then also keep it in mind what we talk about at work too. Sometimes jokes are not appropriate, levels of jokes or certain jokes, negative remarks that we think may be funny are not funny to some people, especially if we're demeaning their abilities and skills. One of the things I encourage you to do is in a team meeting, in a conversation with your folks, or whether you're doing performance management or when you're getting, you're meeting with your supervisors, is talk about what respect looks like for you. Because I can ask 10 different people what respect looks like, what it means, and I'll probably get 10 different answers or a multiple of 10 different sets of answers on what it looks like for them. Obviously, some of the basic things, yet for some people, it can be something that is as important as, gosh, when you walk into the office, you don't say good morning to me and I'm there. It can be something like, when I send you an email, sometimes it takes you a long time to respond. So it's things like that, that just getting to know your folks and understanding what's important to them. I did touch on empathy earlier, and I want to talk about empathy for just a moment, because Forbes magazine has said for the past few years, it truly is the most important skill that a leader can have. And when I speak leadership, folks, I'm not just talking about a leader that has a lot of people reporting to them. We can be a leader of one. We can be an informal leader on our team. Leaders can mean a number of things. Empathy is that ability to put yourself in that other person's view, their perspective, in their shoes. So somebody comes to me and I'm seeing that something is really bothering them to a degree that I don't understand it because it's not bothering me, right? Yet people aren't like me. We're all different. So I have to say, I have to pause a moment and look at it from that person's point of view that's coming to me very defensive, very upset, and ask them questions. Empathy is that ability to do that and do it well because you're relaying to that person, I understand that you're upset. I care about you, or maybe you're stuck in the mud. Let me help you get out of that mud. It's different than sympathy because sympathy is, I'm going to get in the mud with you. That's not what empathy is. Empathy is helping people get out of that mud or helping them solve their problem. And here's some statements to show empathy that demonstrate that you are looking at it from their point of view. And this can be so powerful in conversations, great conversations that you might find yourselves in. And as you can see, we've broken it out in different areas. So one way is to acknowledge someone's feelings. We don't have to agree with their feelings, but just acknowledging their feelings goes a long way, and saying, I understand you're frustrated. I hear that you're upset about this, and your feelings, are valid. Let's try to find a solution towards it if you do agree with them. Or you can, listening and understanding. I can see that this is really challenging for you. Let's talk more about it. These give you an opportunity to have people share even more with you when they're feeling that frustration or they're in a bad spot. But it also helps you too to better understand what's happening behind those scenes and what's causing this. That fair and equitable workplace is also so critically important. So making sure you have a complaint mechanism in place at your workplace. So whether it's an employee hotline, an assistance hotline, whatever it is, or they know who to go to if they have a concern, that goes such a long way. And if we're brought a concern and we can address it, let's try to address it as soon as possible, because it's not like fine wine. It doesn't get better with time if we don't address things, and we don't want them to escalate if they don't need to. Sharing that corporate awareness, I talked earlier about our values, what our mission is, what our vision is, the things that we are as a company, what we hope to be as a company. Being able to talk about that, talking about those values, and acknowledging people when they really demonstrate those values to others in the workplace. Also, talking about, what we do, but also what's not acceptable here too. So when we think about unfair treatment, we want to share that awareness too, that we don't tolerate this here. If you look at our employee handbook, this is not tolerated in the workplace. Here's what we want to do, what we aspire to do, but here's what we don't tolerate. These are our rules of engagement. And then provide training for people on bias and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is also an opportunity to have conversations. That's the power of doing some of these trainings, to have those discussions. How does bias show up at work for us? Sometimes it's unconscious. We don't realize we're being biased towards someone. So just having those discussions, having those workshops go such a long way in creating that awareness for your team. And then take things seriously. Because if we're saying we're an equitable workplace, we're providing you equitably with all the tools, resources, support to be successful here. I want to make sure that if I'm hearing something that's not happening, that we take that seriously and we take it to where we need to take it. Some of you may have an HR department, some of you may handle it internally, whatever that may be. Make sure that people understand that there are places to go if things aren't being handled equitably in the workplace or fairly, because you don't want your company to get in trouble, because that can lead to other things too. And then going back to burnout for just a moment is some of those impacts. So these are some things to keep in mind. I talked earlier about absenteeism, right? So 63% more likely to be sick, take a sick day, 50% less likely to discuss how to approach performance goals with their manager. We're not always good about talking about what we need from people, from others. And if we're on that verge of burnout, we may close up even more and not even think that there's help out there, or even consider asking anyone for assistance or clarification. Take a look at that third one. 23% more likely to visit the ER. We don't pay attention when we have those feelings that come with burnout. we expose ourselves even greater to things that could hurt us. And then also, this is a scary one. We want to keep our good employees almost over 2.5 times more likely to be looking for another job, actively looking for another job. So that's not just standing by, that's actually actively out there, putting my resume out there and applying for jobs. Excuse me. The spillover effect, questions for you. Asking yourself, and we're not going to do a poll on this, but asking yourself, how are you showing up for work? Are you showing up engaged, ready to go, bringing good energy to the workplace? How are you managing your emotions? Are you acknowledging them? Are you aware of them? Are you still conducting yourself in a way that's professional and calmly and able to still create good relationships at work? And do you help your teammates manage their emotions? If we have a handle on ourselves, it's going to be easier for us to work with our employees to handle their emotions. Or when we get in a crisis, how we behave is how our employees are going to think this is how I need to behave. Because if we can handle things calmly, work through it, our employees will also learn how to do that. So some things about managing your emotions, and these could be really helpful to talk about in your team too, is just know what your triggers are. There's emotional intelligence assessments you can take. We at CEA do workshops around this too, but on emotional intelligence, but acknowledging what triggers you. There are certain things in each one of us that triggers us. And the more that we know what they are, the better we can prepare if we do get triggered, how we respond versus react. Naming your emotions. Earlier, I asked you how you were feeling. How are you really doing? Being able to name those emotions, how you were feeling, and gosh, okay, I'm feeling angry right now. Why am I feeling angry? What do I need to do about this? That goes a long way too in managing your emotions because you're focusing on let's move towards resolving this. Choosing logic. When you look at emotional intelligence, we have 3 parts of our brain, right? We have the limbic part, which is the survival brain, but we also have the emotional and the rational parts of our brain. And choosing logic over emotions, when we can manage our emotions, allows us to feel good about how we responded to something. If we can't get out of our emotional state, we're not going to make it to the logical state to solve something or to respond in a way that you're proud of. Stop the negative spinning. Remember what I talked about earlier with all the thoughts that go through our head, and sometimes the huge percentage that can be negative thoughts? Stop that spinning. Stop it, because it's not healthy for you. Also, focus on the solution, not the problem. It'll take us away from the blame game, and let's beat up that problem and let's fight to solve it. Let's not beat up each other. Let's find a way to get this resolved. And a good way to do this is to think about the rest model. So the first part of rest is relax, breathe. The 4 counts when we breathe in, hold it for 4, release it for maybe 6 counts to just get that out of there. Just doing that a number of times can relax you so you can think more clearly. You get to the logical brain. Evaluate. Ask yourself, what's happening? How am I feeling right now, and where am I feeling it? Is it in my gut? Where is it that I'm feeling this right now? And just evaluate, why am I feeling this way? What am I doing? And name it. Yes, I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed because I've got a lot to do and someone's interrupting me. But just having that conversation and then taking it a step further. Yeah, they're interrupting me, but they need my help right now. That will help me just settle down a little bit. Set your intention. What do you want the outcome of your conversations to be, folks? Do you want them to be growing your relationship, enhancing your relationship with the people you work with? Or do you care? Because if you care, you want to grow that relationship, make it stronger. And if I want a relationship that's strong with my colleagues, I'm going to behave in a way that's going to produce that. And then taking that action, right? Moving mindfully forward. Choosing my words carefully, especially if I know that I may be in a slightly emotional state, choosing my words with purpose and meaning, with the intent, I want a positive outcome. I don't need to get anybody else upset. We're all in this together. Everybody gets their stuff that we have to handle. I want to be able to walk away from my interactions with people feeling that I did it in a way that I did my best and I didn't overreact and I really thought about what I said. And self-care really does improve wellness. So, when we take care of ourselves, it has to start with us. If we're not doing it, if we're burning that candle at both ends, we're not eating well, we're not sleeping well, we're getting triggered at work and reacting versus responding. Um, our team's not going to want to. They're going to think, oh my gosh, this is how we have to operate here. So take care of yourself. We tend to put ourselves last. You need to put yourself first because you're not going to be able to help or support others if you're not in a good place. And here's just some tips. Take a breather. What is that thing for you that just kind of helps you relax? Is it a walk? Is it going to a movie? Is it going out for a nice dinner? Is it just playing with your pets or playing with your children? Whatever it might be, taking up a hobby or doing your favorite hobby. Meditate. So many benefits to meditation. I mean, there are so many opportunities, apps, things we can do for ourselves when it comes to meditation. It helps us with problem solving, our thinking. We make better decisions. Sing, have some fun with it, dance, laugh. I can't say enough about the power of humor and laughter in the workplace. That releases so much stress when we're able to do that. And looking at the funny side of things sometimes, because sometimes we think about people we've worked with before who can just alleviate so much tension because they can see the funny side of something, still taking their job seriously, but being able to laugh about it and helping people laugh about it to relax. Set boundaries, and I'll talk more about those. And vent. If you need to vent, it's okay. Sometimes we need to go to someone and say, I just need to talk with you. I just need to say something. Let me just talk. I don't need an answer. I just have to vent. I just have to talk a little bit because that helps us too when we have people we trust who will listen to us. And then the boundaries that I talked about, making sure you're choosing those boundaries over the barriers and people will treat us how we allow them to treat us, how we teach them to treat us. So making sure in your own self-care, but also respecting others, having those boundaries. If you need to set off quiet time for yourself to get a project done so you don't have 10 interruptions, then making sure you do that for yourself. Know when your best work is. When am I at my best? Is it morning? Is it midday? Is it 5 o'clock in the afternoon? You want to tackle those toughest tasks at your best time. And deliver with empathy, as I mentioned, put yourself in your teammate's shoes. Make agreements. Sometimes we have to agree to things for the greater good, for the good of our team, our company. So, it's okay to do that, knowing that there's going to be a time that it's going to be going the other way for me too. And then also giving based on long-term benefit, not short-term fear. So give your all, know that it does come back. And when you're doing good for others, it's hard to get caught up in ourselves. And then this is a big one that can be really helpful for you is learn to say no clearly, effectively, and graciously. Many times some of us are people pleasers or we don't know how to say no and we get ourselves overwhelmed and we get assignments that we've thought, gosh darn it, I can't get my other stuff done because I've accepted this. So look at those ways that you can say no to things that aren't as important. And this helps in our personal life too, that aren't as important, because when you can say no to those things that aren't as important as the most important things, it allows you to say yes to those most important things and also to get them done. And people say, well, how do I explain that to them, Jessica? You don't have to go into all the detail why you can't do something. Sometimes it's something just as simple as saying, unfortunately, it's not a good time for me. So no, or I can't at this time. People will respect that if we do it kindly and professionally. And what employees have told us they want, what's really important, as I mentioned, the people first, workplace flexibility when I can have it. I want people I work with to have empathy, to show that, the diversity and inclusion. I want to grow. I want to know I have a future here with the company. And also my company supports my health and well-being. I see it in my leader, I see it in my teammates, and there's benefits that support that. My company really does support that. Things that are trendy now, folks, that are things to be aware of, the flexible schedules. I talked about that before. Some benefits customized to employee needs. It can be a wellness stipend so people can join a gym or get workout clothes or get running shoes. Employee resource groups or employees can come together and talk about things, recognition problems that I talked about, wellness programs. Some companies create wellness programs and offer benefits to employees that allow them to join gyms, that allow them to do things that will create that balance for them in their lives. And some reduce meetings, say, do we need to have as many meetings? What do we really have to have right now? These are things that are trending. These are things you can talk about in your workplace, and taking a look at your workplace and say, what do I need to do? Or are there things we can do at our company a little bit differently? And then again, rethinking our work culture. Are we where we want to be? You can have a survey done at your company where employees can answer anonymously how they're feeling about certain things at the company. We work with employees all the time, employers all the time at CEA, and they're called climate studies. But those are things you can do to see how employees are feeling. How are they feeling about the culture? Because if we take that people first approach, it's going to be so important. They're going to know we see them as human beings first, employees second. They feel respected, heard, seen. They know their voice matters, and it cultivates trust, which results in that connectedness and feeling I belong here. This is where I belong. And then bring in humanity to the workplace. Some things that you can do that I've talked about before, because we want people to feel good about where they work. That's important. And then How to Make Work Human. There's a great book out on this called Make Work Human by Eric Mosley. But it's thanking people. It's talking about our shared sense of meaning, what we do at work, what's important to all of us at work, what's important to our customers, and how we deliver our services, and celebrating things, finding those things to celebrate at work, whether it's birthdays, anniversaries, those things that we can do for our folks and for each other. And then these are the benefits when we can. I'm giving you a lot of information so that you can look back at the handouts and be reminded. And what was that she mentioned? Or maybe there's a benefit to this. If I want to do this at work, here's what I can tell my boss. But these are the benefits of making work human. All of these things that we want to see. And if you take a look, retention, innovation, creativity, better customer service, and better success for the company. So my question to all of you is, what's one step you're going to take moving forward for your own self-care and your well-being? And how can you bring that humanity and wellness into the workplace for your company? And with that, I'm going to bring Anna back so she can go ahead and just close this for us. It's been a pleasure. If you have any questions, feel free. I'm able to stay as long as I need to. So Anna, I'm going to bring up the codes for us.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. I love this training. It's so much good stuff for like professionally and personally. So I really love this training. I want to direct your attention over to the chat box. Let's cover what's on screen first. Hold on, don't get ahead of yourself, Anna. So if you're joining us for continuing education credits, your HRCI code today is 670426, SHRM code 24-UPUQJ. If for any reason you run into any difficulty redeeming those codes for credit, just go ahead and shoot us an email, ceainfo@employers.org. We will make sure that you get credit for joining us live today. In the chat, I want you to go up a couple messages. There is the next training coming up, sponsored by our partners over at Central Valley Hotline, July 24th. This is a mid-year labor law update. It's a very important training. We really encourage you to attend and attend live. Yeah, really, really good training. And then lastly, as I mentioned in the beginning, we do have that survey that takes less than a minute, but the feedback that you provide to us, we really make sure that we continue to hopefully exceed your expectations with trainings like this, as well as additional resources. So with that, thank you, Jessica, for sharing your expertise and your joy with us. And thank you to the entire Central Valley HR Hotline team for not just sponsoring today, but for gathering all these fine people. And thank you for showing up live on your lunch hour. We hope to see you in July. Have a good day. Cheers.